Hello everyone and welcome to my new video. And what is this video about? Well, I'm going to mess about in Max for Live and make a little sequencer to chop up breaks and maybe other things depending on what your tastes are. My tastes are today breaks, classic breaks. Have you ever heard of this break before? It's quite famous. Maybe 175 is a bit much for a Tuesday. Let's come down to 140. That's it. Okay, very good. So also, are you familiar with Simpler? Simpler is a really nice little instrument and lends itself quite well to slicing up breaks. In fact, I think they were probably thinking that when they designed it. I'm going to drop this breakbeat in here and set it to slice. And now these are all sliced into bits, which I'm triggering from my push right now. And there's a variety of ways in which that you can slice on here. You can slice via transient, which is done by default, which is very nice. But I'm going to go a little bit more old school and I'm going to slice via, do I want region or beats? I'm going to go with region. I'm going to say slice by region and I want it sliced 16 times into 16 equal regions, giving me 16 slices of eighth notes. So those little 16th note ghost notes, let's turn that velocity down, that's going to bother me. Those little 16th note ghost notes are in one sample. This is a classic way of slicing breaks. But I kind of thought, wouldn't it be nice to make like a little sequencer to go with it, like a little simpler slicing buddy kind of sequencer. So I'm going to make one of those right now in Max for Live. I'm going to attempt it. So I'm going to go to Max for Live. And I'm going to go to the Max MIDI effect and I'm going to pull in a new Max MIDI effect and put that there. And then I'm going to open it and we're in Max now. There's a fly in here. Get a life, mate. Get out of here. Like no one wants you here. Okay, I've dealt with that fly now. I've actually been thrown out of house parties in much a similar fashion. Anyway, here we are in Max for Live. So we're going to make a sequencer and I'm going to use an object called Live Grid. Live Grid is a very neat little UI thing where we can click and drag around here and kind of make little grids and steps and stuff like this. You might have seen it from things like Buffer Shuffler or some other things, but I'm going to use it to make a little kind of simpler slice sequencer type thing. So that's all very nice. There's a couple of things I want to do. First, I'm going to hit Command I to open the inspector and I want to disable the directions panel. Okay, and I also think I want it to have, what do we got? 16 columns and 16 rows. That'll do for now because in Ableton, we sliced our loop into 16 regions. And generally, a good starting point is a 16-step sequencer. This all looks pretty good to me. So we're going to need a way to drive our live.grid in order to make it useful as a sequencer. If I was to hit I on my keyboard to create an integer box and connect that to this rather large live.grid right now and move up and down, you can see that it's indexing around the items in the grid with simply numbers. So we basically need to create a way to drive these numbers round and round so we can access all of the items in the grid. The grid is currently in, or rather not in, matrix mode. If it's in matrix mode, then you can have like multiple things, you know, you can fill up the whole thing. But I actually don't want that. I actually kind of want it to be one thing per step because we're kind of working with a sliced up break. And so we don't really want to trigger, well, I don't want to trigger more than one slice on one step. I want it to be one slice at a time. So we're going to have it like that. That's fine. So how can we drive that? Well, we're going to bring in the phaser, the humble phaser. It may not seem like much, but it's got it where it counts, kid. That was a Star Wars reference. Did you spot that? Let's go in. Let's zoom in a little bit. So the phaser ramps from 0 to 1 at a specified frequency. So if I create a float here and say, okay, so now that's ramping from 0 to 1 at 10 hertz. If I said 1 hertz, then that's now ramping from 0 to 1. I know that this is an oscilloscope, but that is actually ramping from 0 to 1 at the sample rate specified by our audio interface. So you can see that it's not quite going to 1, but it is basically going from 0 to 1. So this is, what's good about this is that all of these numbers are happening at the sample rate of our audio interface, which means we're going to get rock solid timing. And also we can sync it to Live's transport, because remember, we're working in Ableton Live here, right? So how do we make it sync to Live's transport? Well, I'll show you. First of all, I'm going to give it the argument 1n. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say at frequency bars. In fact, I don't think I even need to do that. I might just say 1, 0, or no, let's do 1 dot 1 dot at lock 1. So what have I just done? I've typed in 1.0.0 at lock 1. The 1.0.0 means 1 bar in the bars, beats, and units timing syntax of Max. There are other ones, milliseconds, hertz, sample rate, and note values, but I'm going to go with bars, beats, and units. The at lock 1 attribute means lock to the transport. Because we're inside Max for Live, then we're going to be locking to Ableton's transport. So as you can see, it stopped ramping. But if I go back to Ableton and start the transport and go back, you can see now it's ramping. In fact, if I just hit stop on the push right now, there we go, it stopped. And if I press play on the push again, now it's ramping. Okay, so we've got a phaser locked to Live's transport. This is exactly what we want. This is going to give us great timing. Okay, so, but the thing is though, right, is that this is ramping from 0 to 1. And our sequencer goes from 1 to 16. There are 16 steps starting on number 1. So we're going to have to do some things mathematically in order to make the phaser ramp from 1 to 16. Also, we're going to need to convert it from MSP, which is this, you know, sort of yellow and black striped cable, to a grey Max cable like this. It's because this is a signal and we need a message. We need a Max message. So let's first of all do that. I'm going to click the cable, hold shift and press N, and then I'm going to type snapshot. So snapshot will convert signal values to numbers, which means that we can take an MSP audio signal and turn it into a Max number. And we need to do that at a specific interval. So I'm just going to say 1 millisecond. Every 1 millisecond, give me the number that's being output here. So now if I was to go back to Ableton and start the transport and then go back to Max, then you can see that we now have that ramp, but in a floating point number. But we don't want a floating point number and we don't want it to go from 0 to 1. So why don't we try multiplying that by 16? Because that's how many steps there are in our sequencer. So I'm going to click that cable, hold shift and press N, and I'm going to say multiply by 16 float. The little dot is a float. So now it's going from 0 to 15. It's actually going from 0 to 15. That's fine. We'll worry about that later. But the thing is also, we've got these floating point numbers in between, and we don't want that. We just want the integers. So we need to filter out all of those floating point numbers and just give ourselves integers. So I'm going to click that cable. I'm going to hold shift, press N, and I'm going to use an object called change, which filters out repetitions of a number. Now we've just got integers. Fantastic. So if I delete that float and create an integer, then we're now ramping from 0 to 15. Thing is though, is that the sequencer goes from 1 to 16. Well, that's fine. We'll just select that cable, hold shift, press N, and go +1. Now we're going from 1 to 16. And I can pretty much plug this integer into our live grid, and there it goes. It's going. It's going, and all this stuff is happening. So that's good. I'm just going to have a little celebration guzzle. All right, so let's zoom out a little bit and orientate ourselves back a little bit more to where we started. Right, so the thing is, right, we need to convert the output of what this live grid is sending us to MIDI. So currently it's sending out, you know, each of these little blue things here is a number. And that number is the, I guess that's the the column. That's the index in the column. And this is the row, at what row that is. So if we stop the transport, we're on column 6 or row, yeah, column 6, and we're on the 10th row. Yeah, okay. So if I was to change that to, well, actually, no, it won't update, but you get what I'm saying. So if I was to change that to 8, yeah, or if I change that to 7, okay, fine. So we're going to need to convert that to the relevant MIDI number in order to trigger our slices in Simpler. Let's go back to Ableton for a second. Now, the first slice, we need to know what MIDI note that is. So I'm going to find out what it is. It's that one. It's C1. I'm just going to put that MIDI note in there and just fire that off. I'm going to go back to Max and I'm going to find out what MIDI number that is, what MIDI note number. So that MIDI is coming in through this MIDI in object here, but that is passing through a crap load of data. Every MIDI note is actually a gazillion, bazillion, trizillion, mazillion numbers, and I only want one number. So I need to think, how can I get that number? Well, I'm going to use an object called MIDI pass. I'm going to connect the MIDI in to the MIDI pass. Excuse me. And the first, let's stop that a second. The first outlet is the note on, note off, and pitch and velocity pair like it's a list. That itself is that one item in that list is also a list. It's just lists inside lists inside lists. I still need to even unpack that. So I'm going to create an unpack object which will split that list into two things. So the first outlet will be my MIDI note number, and the second one will be my velocity. So if I create a couple of integers here, we can see what's going on when I start that. So the MIDI note number is 36 and the velocity is 100. That's fine. So the thing is, our sequencer starts at, let's go back all the way to the beginning. It starts at 1. The lowest item value is 1. So in order to make that 36, we're just going to have to add 35. So I'm going to select that cable, hold Shift, press N, and I'm going to say add 35. All right. So now that very, very, very bottom step there is going to produce the note 36, which is the lowest note in Simpler when you slice, regardless. I think if I even did up to 64 slices, it would still be the same number. Yes, it is. That's fine. Let's go back to 16. All right. So now we need to pack that into a MIDI note message. How are we going to do that? Well, I think we're going to need make note, and it wants some arguments, velocity, duration, channel. I'll leave those. I'll say, what do we have here? Pitch, velocity, duration. I'm going to say 35. I'm going to say 36, 100, and 100. That's fine. Okay. So if I now connect, what's going on here? MIDI channel. Yeah. So if I connect that to that, it's going to send the MIDI note out. Well, it's going to make a MIDI note, which we then need to send out, and I shall do that with a note out. So note out wants pitch and velocity and duration, I think, or let me check. Let's just look at the, yeah, that's sending the velocity as well. Okay, so let's plug out of the make note, the pitch output and the velocity output. All right, that should be pretty much it. Let's go back to Ableton. Let's delete that clip and see what the sequence is doing. It works, it works. Right, so, but it sounds really bad. That's not really what I want. Okay, so yeah, that's at the wrong timing resolution. That's going at 16th notes, I think. So that's probably because of a handful of things. I'm just going to delete some of these numbers here. I don't want you, and I don't want you. Let's just maybe neaten this up a little bit. I'm going to have to make this all a bit smaller later on anyway. So the thing is that we're ramping from 0 to 1 over the course of 1 bar, but we've sliced into eighth notes. So we actually probably really want to ramp at half the speed. If it was 16th notes, it would make sense. So this is a little bit confusing. This is a 2-bar drum loop. So if I slice it 16 times, that's slicing it into eighth notes. If I wanted to slice it into 16th notes, I would have to slice it 32 times. Let's go back to Max. And start Ableton. So if I made a little sequence like this, yeah. A bit choppy, isn't it? Okay, so that isn't what we want. I want to slice it 16. I want to slice this 2-bar loop 16 times to give me eighth notes, and which means I'm going to have to make the phaser run for twice as long. But this is as good a time as any to explore what options we could implement in order to have the choice over how fast or slow we want to clock the phaser. So I'm going to make a pack object. I'm going to give it 3 zeros, and basically what I'm going to do is use this to create a list. You remember earlier on, I specified the rate of the phaser in bars, beats, and units. If I create a pack message with the same format, then I can specify the bars, beats, and units dynamically. So if I create a just an integer here and connect it to the first item in the pack, the first input in the pack, then we're going to get 1 0 0 0. And then if I create a live scope here and we look at what the phaser's doing, it's ramping from 0 to 1 over the course of a bar. If I set it to 2, now it's ramping from 0 to 1 over the course of 2 bars, right? Because I've said 2 bars, 0 beats, 0 units, right? Okay, I think I maybe didn't give this enough duration. No. Oh, I know what it is. I didn't hit warp. Okay, so let's hit warp and repitch. Okay, now the note duration doesn't matter, but I'll leave it at 500. Yes. Now we're cooking. Right. So we've got, and it's already getting quite messy. So, all right. So now I've got a little bespoke sequencer, which I've designed specifically in order to slice aim breaks at eighth notes. And everything's clocked and everything works fine. I can just squiggle around here and just draw in whatever kind of crap I want. And then I'm going to get like a funky amen. But wouldn't it be fun if I could just tell it to randomize each time it goes round? Because I love random. Everyone, well, not everyone. Actually, some people don't like it, and sometimes I have to deal with those people in the YouTube comments, but not very often, luckily these days. So yes, if we right-click the leftmost top inlet of the live.grid, there's a message, random. There it is. So we can create the random message and hit that, and it's just going to randomize. It's brilliant. I love it. It just scrambles the entire contents of the live.grid. But what if we could tell it to do that every time the sequence comes to the end and then goes back round? We could say, when you get to this point, randomize the sequence. Okay, how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we could maybe think about using the numbers that are coming out of this part of the patch in a way that we could... Okay, maybe not there. Let's do it from here. Yeah, it won't really make any difference, but let's go with the previous one. So I'm going to hit N. I'm going to choose cell. I'm going to say cell 1. So when the cell receives the number 1, it's going to give me a bang, which effectively means that when the sequencer goes back to the start, i.e. step 1, it's going to bang this. Let's see if it does it. Yeah, it did it just then. It's going to go back to the start. Watch. Bang. Yeah. Bang. So we just simply connect that to the random message, and now the pattern is going to randomize each time it goes round. Brilliant. Let's whack the tempo back up to 175. Yeah. Thing is, what if we don't want it to randomize each time? We want to have the choice, you know? Choices are important. So we'll just make a little gate here. Let's disconnect that. I'm going to make a gate. I'm going to plug the output of that into my gate, and then the output of that to the cell, and I'm going to create a toggle. And now if the gate is closed, it will not randomize. And then when I open the gate, it randomizes. Hooray! Okay, so that is really the basic part of it. And already that sounds pretty useful to me, like a quick thing to just drop in and start screwing around with breaks and coming up with interesting patterns. And I'm sure we could probably route the output of that to another MIDI channel. Let's try routing it to this one and see what happens. There we go. Okay, there's maybe one thing I would like to address, and that is the actual note length duration. So the duration is set here by the make note. It would be quite nice if we could match it to the resolution that we're clocking at, and indeed that we're slicing at. So we're slicing at 1/8 notes. So we could, okay, I'm going to make a T trigger 8N. Right. I'm going to connect that to a message, and then I'm going to bang it to see if that works. All right. Let's go with that for now. Let's translate that. Translate note values, because 8N is a note value, to MS for milliseconds at listen 1. Listen 1 means that listen to the transport. If the transport changes, then change the I've typed transport, not translate. Translate. Okay. Translate note values 8N to MS at listen 1. Listen 1 means listen to the transport. Listen to the transport. And then convert it accordingly if the transport changes. So if I just space, if I just make an integer here and then bang this bang, it has decided that 1/8 notes at 100 and whatever was I at 175 BPM is 171 seconds long. If I change the tempo in Ableton, which I'm doing with the push, you can see how that number is changing right now. So I'm changing the tempo. We're now at 100 BPM. So an 1/8 note at 100 BPM is 300 milliseconds. So I'll go back to like 160, and I'll use that number to determine the note length duration. So I'll just simply connect that number to that, bang that, and then let's see if we go back here. Let's try recording that MIDI again and see if it lines up a little bit better. Yeah, look at that. Oh, it's this touch over. You know what? It's fine. It'll do. If If you want to record the MIDI later, just select all those notes and do quantize and then everything. Yeah, anyway, so that's not really, I'm not too concerned about that, but it's nice to have that in there. So, okay, let's go back to Max. There's still a huge amount of things that we could explore right now, like ways to maybe make the sequence kind of loop at a specific point. So let's sort of move some of this stuff over here. I'm going to zoom out a tiny bit and look at the modulo object. So let's move this all down here a little bit. So I'm going to put a modulo object in. And first, I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to put a modulo object in and I'm going to say modulo at 16. All right. So what does the modulo object do? Divide two numbers, output the remainder. That's one way to explain it. I kind of prefer to explain it as it just kind of wraps numbers round. So currently now, when we start the transport, it's going to go from 1 to 16 and then come, it's gone from 1 to 15, even though I said +1. Okay, let's maybe swap these around and put that there. Okay, now that's weird. Okay. All right, so it's going from 1 to 16. If I take an integer here and connect it to this inlet and say modulo 3, now it's going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If I said 4, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's still going at the same rate that the phaser is driving it at. So if I connect that to our sequencer now, you can see it's only advancing to the first 4 steps. Try 6. So we've kind of got like a little bit of a repetition to our sequence. If we wanted to just go to 8, okay. Let's bang it. Different pattern now. So now, I mean, that kind of doesn't really, that kind of defeats the point really, doesn't it? But okay, let's put it back to 16. And let's take that, plug that back in so we can randomize our pattern. So there's a couple of decisions that could be made there. If you modulo the counter to wrap around every 3 beats, but you want the sequence to be randomly generated after 2 bars, then you're going to have to think about a compromise there. And I'm not going to do that because I kind of wanted this to be a punchy video without too much maths or fiddling about. So I'm kind of pretty happy with that. I'm going to take out that modulo thing though, because I really just wanted this to be like quite a quick and dirty sort of sequencer. But that's just a little thing that you can explore later. I'm sure at some point I'll go a little bit deeper with sequences because it's very interesting. Max sequences, sequences are fun, aren't they? So let's maybe quickly try and turn this into like a Max for Live device that we can use in Ableton. So first things first, I think I'm gonna maybe keep it quite simple. So I might actually hard code some stuff here. So I will tell the phaser to just ramp a 0 to 1 over the course of 2 bars. I'm going to delete that number and I'm going to create a load mess. I'm going to get rid of that T8N and I'm going to do load mess 8N and then I'm going to translate that to to milliseconds. I might just -1. -1 so that the note, I'm certain the notes won't overlap. It doesn't matter. I'm just doing it because I might not be able to sleep tonight if I don't do that. So let's put that there. And really the only thing I think I want is some of this stuff here. So let's put that back in there. Let's just check that that's working. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to make a live toggle. And I'm just going to make it sort of fairly big like that. I'm going to swap it for that. Connect that there. And then I'm going to create a live button. Yeah. And I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And I'm going to swap that out for that one. Put that there. So now I can hit that and bang, get a random sequence, or I can trigger this and it will let the gate through. So I will make a comment here, random on loop. And maybe I'll just squash that into, maybe I can get that text in there. That's fine. Let's make the text white. Okay, that's it. Random on loop. And that's all good. Let's select these four items here and right click and go add to presentation. Okay, this stuff, I'll leave that in there. Let's go to the patcher inspector up here, inspector, and then there's a little P. And let's go to basic and let's say open in presentation. Let's switch to presentation mode and we can maybe try and make this nice and large. I just want to do snap to grid and indeed turn the grid on. Let's go snap to grid. Let's make this as large as we can. That looks pretty good. And then we'll just put that there and then we'll put that there. Zoom out a little bit, go to object, no, where is it? View, set device width, zoom out a bit and just put that there like that. All right, now let's save it. I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call it Simpler Slice Buddy. Okay, and I'm going to close it, and there it is. There is our little sequencer. Yeah. Okay, that'll do. So there you go. That was a little quick jam with Max to build a little sequencer that's very specifically designed to slice amens at eighth notes in Simpler in Ableton. I'm going to go and put this set and this device on my Patreon right now, where if you'd like to go and subscribe for about £4, $4, $5 something a month, you can get that, and plus a whole load of other stuff and all kinds of other things and loads of cool people hanging out together, and we all have a great time. And it all goes towards me. Okay, thanks everyone. See you next time. Bye.